So, sober up, everybody. That was a joke. Where's my friends? Where's my friends? Okay, so, yeah, the Power Probe 4, I haven't had time to explore it yet. But if you're going to get the Power Probe 4, Chuck, I would strongly suggest that you get this little leads package called, what is that, 22-piece back probe kit. Just because it's got a whole bunch of little probey probes and angled probes, and it's got alligator clips and a whole bunch of leads like this.
Question.
You know, yeah.
Does a Power Probe can actually test the coil on the fly and see a graft?
I thought so, but I couldn't remember. You know, there's some significant difference between the 3 and the 4, but I think so. Yeah, you're talking about the ignition coil?
Right.
Yeah. That's what.
Does that mean the Power Probe 3 is coming up for sale shortly from the store at Roadcliffe?
Nah, Chuck beat you to it.
I got it, baby.
Damn.
Chuck's the true homie. That's why he gets it first.
You snooze, you lose, Rudy.
Hey, it's all good, bro.
You got another man's gonna be by his side.
Hey, you probably use it more than I will anyways.
Oh, there we go. Okay, well, that's progress. So, HIKL, okay. Good. Mr. Lopez, good to see you, man. What?
Hello, Mr. Oakcliffe. How are you?
Good. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Good. All right, so let's get after it, folks. We are currently talking about electronic engine controls. And that's good because this is why we went through the long desert of theory, is to get to the lush forest of application. So we've been talking about different sensors. Let's see. Let me go ahead and hit share like this. And we talked about all the different sensors, the different types of sensors, talked about oxygen sensor heaters. Then we talked about closed loop operation. And then we talked about open loop. And then we talked about limited operational strategy, failures of rationality. We talked about stepper motors. Not much because there's not much to talk about. There we go. And we get right there. Okay, so let me get my notey notes. And we are going to talk about real systems. Now, we got 12 weeks left after this session, so that's not many. So, golly. Actually, this is better well, okay, so if we go back to the shop in March, that'll kind of screw up my plan, my evil plan for this. But I think we could have some people, well, shoot, they're going to put a door between the classroom and the lab. So that opens up some possibilities for us. Now we don't want to have to walk all the way around. But plus they're putting out way more lights out in the yard.
Save your students who are disabled and can't walk that far.
Right, including me. Okay, so this is 2/18/21. So first system we want to talk about is fuel system. It's going to allow us to talk about a whole bunch of applications of what we've been talking about for the longest. Okay, so let's talk about the parts of the fuel system. Well, there's the tank. There's the fuel level sender. There's the fuel pump. And what we're going to notice is, since we've studied these things in terms of their basic electrical components, we're going to find out that it's very easy to study rather complex systems because we already understand the fundamental issues underneath them. All right, fuel filter. Fuel lines. Fuel pressure Regulator. Huh. Fuel rail. And fuel injectors. That's about it. So there you go. That's pretty much fuel system. Now, there's a relatively new player on the scene. It's just got more and different configurations, but it doesn't have any different technology to speak of. Certainly nothing we're not used to. All right, so let's talk the tank. What does the tank do? The tank is where we store the fuel before we use it. It's usually on the opposite side of the vehicle from the engine, just because that's where the space is. As a result, we have to have some way of moving the fuel from where we keep it to where we use it. And that's what we use the fuel pump for. We pressurize the fluid so we can get it to move. And that's one of those fundamental understandings we've been repeating over and over throughout the year. So fuel tank used to be made of steel. Now they make them out of plastic because the steel would start to rust inevitably. And then all those rust chips would end up all over the fuel system, including the injectors where it would clog the injectors. Okay, so in most vehicles, you're going to find the fuel tank in the back of the vehicle. And inside the fuel tank, there's going to be...
Except for trucks, they're on the side.
Depending on the truck. Yeah. Usually in the fuel tank, you're going to find this little thing right here, which is the fuel pump assembly, whatever. And it's going to have this part right here, which is the fuel level sender. Sorry, it's the fuel level sender. It's the float, just like in your toilet bowl. And if you look at the operation close up, you can see that it's just a variable resistor like we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. And as the float, as the fuel level changes, the amount of resistance between here and here changes, and as a result, the amount of current going back to the, well, actually it'd be the amount of voltage, since it's going to the PCM, will change, and that will, well, it's another variable resistor, just like a coolant temperature sensor, basically, and it'll change the voltage going back to the PCM, and from that, the PCM will know, for instance, if it can run some monitors, and also if it, did we talk about monitors in this class?
It also sends the signal then to the dash to indicate
Right.
how much fuel you have.
Instrument cluster. Did we talk about monitors in this class?
I don't think this year we did have.
I don't think we did.
Mm-mm.
Doggone it. All right, let's talk about that first. Sorry. Next page. Does anyone else agree with Michelle? Did we talk about monitors and I just don't remember? Yeah, because monitors is what's supposed to come next. Sorry. Yep. Okay. Monitors. Sorry.
Okay.
All right. Let's try this again. Sober up. Okay, got it out of sequence. All right, monitors. Also sometimes known as I am readiness. Which you can see on your little scanalito right here. See where it says I am right there? And that's what these lights are for, is for the monitors, which is why I suggest that if you're going to buy a scan tool, a cheap one, you should get one that has these three lights. That's why I like this manufacturer. Centec used to be Harbor Freight's old house brand, but Now,
The scan tool that me and Chuck have both have that too.
Yeah.
Kizye is my brand now, KZYEE. It's the same manufacturer. It's just a different brand name, and it's for sale on Amazon. I strongly suggest it. It's like the next version from this, the newer version of this. And there's a million different scan tools in this world. So I'm just telling you about the Kizye because I've had good experience with it. So therefore I recommend it. And for $50, you're dumb not to have it, I think. I mean, it'll pay for itself the first time you use it. And you can go around and charm all your friends, especially if you got a fleet to take care of, like my good friend Mr. Burks. You definitely want to have a scan tool like that that's going to make it possible.
Or Mr. Kaufman.
Or Mr. Kaufman, sure. You
Yeah, I
definitely
have to.
Right. There you go. Okay, so now would I get a really complicated Kizzy? No. Well, I just noticed that now the freaking Autels are coming down. I think for $600 you can find an Autel that's got factory software and or bi-directional controls. I wouldn't spend what?
Are you selling any of your OBD1 scan tools
No, me
with a Ford pit plug?
no.
That's all I need. I need an OBD1 with a Ford plug.
Oh,
For
wow.
what?
For the Taurus.
Oh God. No, what you need is you need to put that Taurus on a freaking offer up and too many vehicles, dude. Blowing it. But what do I know? I know a lot. Incidentally, so I am readiness. Now, monitors means that the computer is testing and analyzing the system components automatically. So that means that while you're driving down the street, your computer is going to be hard at work. Oh, shoot, sorry. While you're driving down the street, your computer is going to be hard at work testing out the systems, components, and circuits of all of the things it controls, right? So if you've got 108 computers on your car, they're all going to be doing self-diagnostics. Why? Because the manufacturers came to the realization that if they wanted to make the cars more complicated, they were going to have to give us some kind of diagnostic help so we could prosper in terms of our ability to fix the stuff if they ever needed fixing. So this is important because back in the old days, we used to roll down the window and then discover that it wouldn't roll back up. That was a big problem, especially when it rained, and especially when we drove down to LA, to go to school, and then the window wouldn't roll up. Okay, now what do you do? So that happens a lot less now because the monitors are continuously, the monitors are testing out these systems and components, and they can find problems before we can, which is great. And they're getting better at it all the time, which is great because, for instance, back in the old days, we used to say, when you're going to buy a used car, take it for a test drive. Well, on a 65 Mustang, you can take it on a test drive and you can pretty much do a pretty good job of test driving it, in 15 minutes. But take a C5 Corvette and try to test drive that thing. You won't be able to go through. It's got 10 different computers on it, each of which has many components. So really, it's completely impractical now to think that you could find on a test drive all the problems with this car. And I got to tell you, let's say you got a bad heater core. The only way to find that out is to run hot water through it and wait. Okay, well, what if you want to do a 10-minute test drive? It may not show up, but that could cost you $1,500 to fix. So as a result, or say you had a bad blend door motor or something like that. Are you really going to find all that out in a test drive? Not usually. That's why, folks, if you're going to go buy
Or more.
if you're going to go buy a used vehicle, somebody needs to have a scan tool like this, something that can access the factory network. Because this will actually go after and identify and expose and test every computer on the network. As a result, like for instance, when I bought the red Corvette, the one that Rudy's going to put together in 2 hours, when I bought the red Corvette, I found like 16 faults on it that probably the dude that was selling it didn't even know about, because this will go through everything. Now that becomes a bargaining chip when you decide on the price of the vehicle, right? I cannot overemphasize the importance of taking a scan tool when you go to buy a new used car, but more importantly, somebody needs to have this level of scan tool so that you can really do a deep inquiry into what's going on with this car. Now, are you really going to discover all these things without this kind of help? No, no way, no way, no way. Not on. I mean, the 2015 Volvo XC90 had 108 onboard computers. Do you think you're going to figure out what all of those do on a 10-minute test drive? You're tripping. But you could. Golly, Michelle, what the hell? What's going on? What are you trying to tell me?
Nothing.
What are you saying exactly?
No, I'm just tired.
Yeah. Well, this lecture is not going to make it any easier for you. So anyways, my point was, there's not every monitor is running all the time. There's two types of monitors. There's continuous and there's non-continuous. Okay, now why? Well, because number one, the manufacturers don't want to be running these monitors any more than they have to. Basically, the continuous monitors are required by law. And the reason they don't want to be running these monitors any more than they have to is it's like the more times you look, the more chance you're going to find something bad. And if you find something bad, well, that could become a warranty issue. It would certainly become a reputational issue. So a bunch of this stuff, excuse me, they don't want to run it any more than they have to. However, smog laws being what they are, government requirements, there are certain things that they have to be running the monitors all the time, like for instance, misfire. Okay, so what's a misfire? A misfire is defined as when the combustion either doesn't happen or doesn't happen the way we wanted it to. So that misfire monitor is running all the time. Why is it running all the time? Because we want to know as soon as possible when we got this problem. Other monitors going to be running. Heated oxygen sensor. Heated oxygen sensor. Why? Because if that starts going bad, we want to know right away. Why? Because it affects air-fuel ratio, injector pulse width. So we need to find that out right away before it kills the catalytic converter or maybe even kills the motor. Fuel system, same reason. You know, if we have an injector that's hanging up, staying open, for instance, we need to know that right away before, you know, you could destroy an engine with that. And the last thing is called comprehensive component. Comprehensive means everything, although in this case it doesn't really mean that. And component, so basically they're doing a whole bunch of different components. Which ones? I don't know, probably depends on the manufacturer, probably depends on the year, probably depends on the model. But all you really need to know is that the continuous monitors, the only thing we're continuously monitoring is stuff that we have to, because it takes up a lot of computing power to be constantly moving data back and forth. Okay. Now, there's other monitors. And these monitors are called non-continuous monitors, and they're usually emission control systems like evaporative emissions. Now, non-continuous means we're only going to run these every once in a while.
Yeah.
We're only going to run these in certain conditions. Catalytic converter. Secondary air. That's used to call that air injection. Air injection reactors, I think what GM called it. And exhaust gas recirculation. Now, you'll notice that these are all smog emission control systems.
Was it the catalytic converters that people were stealing? Is that
Yep.
what it was? They caught those guys.
Well, maybe some of them.
Yeah, they caught them. They caught some of them.
Good. I wish they'd bury them under the jail, but they won't because this is California, so they'll probably give them a medal.
2
And
weeks. They'll be out in 2 weeks.
I'll take 2 weeks. I'm surprised they even put them in jail,
I'm just guessing. I don't know if they did.
right? Because if it's less than $950,
Make sure it's a platinum medal so they can sell it.
yeah. But how much are they getting for it? $40, $50, $60?
Probably not much.
Yeah. If it's less than $950, they don't even take them to jail. They just cite them out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody's profiting off that, but it's not the working people.
Right.
That's for sure. Okay, so here's the thing. In the state of California, in fact, all over the nation, I believe, but especially in the state of California, you can only take your car in to do a smog test if you have, well, they'll only pass it if it's out of all the monitors that it runs. If it's an old car, you can only have 2 that haven't run. Or if it's a newer car, you can only have 1 that hasn't run. Usually evaporative emissions tends to be the most difficult one to get run. Now, that's why usually if you go to a good smog place, before they hook you up to the machine that's connected to the state, they're going to put it on one of these. That's going to tell them 2 things. Number one, it's going to tell them if you have run enough monitors to pass a smog test. Number 2, it's also going to tell them if you have some jackass put a tune on your car. So what they did was they made it so EVAP and EGR never run, and now you can't get your car smogged legally. Ask me how I know. No, don't ask me how I know.
I got a feeling.
So now
Red.
these little lights are helpful in that regard because what this is referring to is these are referring to monitors. Yellow means the
Red. Vet.
Why are you talking like that? The yellow means that the monitors have not run yet, or at least enough of the monitors haven't run yet. The red means that the monitors have run and they found a problem. The green light means the monitors have run and you haven't found a problem. Although when I looked at the 99 Suburban, it kept going between green and yellow because I don't know why. So you have to go in and press the IM button and actually check it to make sure that it's just I found that you couldn't trust the colors the way I thought you could. So here's what I did, Chuck, because I'm a smart feller. What I did was I put the ground clip to pins 4 and 5, and I put the red clip to pin 16.
Which is 5 volts or whatever it is.
12. Yeah, that's battery pop. That's B plus. So as a result, now I can come in here like this. And I can come in here like this. Yeah, pins 4 and 5 are ground. And now I can power up the scan tool without being connected to a car, which is kind of groovy, I thought. All right, so as you can see, the choices are onboard diagnostics generation 2 and enhanced onboard diagnostics. That's later edition. And this thing over here says ready test, and that's going to be the monitors. Now, unfortunately, since it's not hooked up to a car, it's not going to read anything. And if I go like this, it's going to run the monitors thing. And it says, okay, CAN standard, CAN extended, controller area network, right? That's computer network. Now it's going to go through a whole bunch of protocols to see what kind of information it can get out of this network. International Standards Organization. Come on. Come on. See, it's looking for a car and it's not finding. CAN standard fast, CAN standard slow. Society of Automotive Engineers. So what we're seeing is it's scanning all the different protocols, scanning the network to see what kind of information it can get about monitors and readiness. It's not going to find anything. So let me take this off. Yeah, it's just asking the same question again. Let me take that off, reboot, Control Alt Delete. And as you can see, now it says OBD2, extended OBD. If I press this little arrow button, it's going to move the cursor over to Ready Test. On this one, if it's offering you what you want, you say okay. If it's not offering what you want, you say escape, and it'll take you someplace else. So if I was to hit okay, it would just go through the same network scan that I just did. Remember, these are primarily powertrain. Everything else I'm kind of suspect on. Haven't had really good luck with it, to tell you the truth, but you know, I've had access to real scan tools for so long, I don't even try to use these for stuff like ABS or airbags. So that's my theory on that. But I thought that was clever. Be a clever boy. You're a clever boy. So, like I said, don't just trust the colors on that. I've learned to my dismay. Okay, so here's the thing about that. Depending on the year of the vehicle, in the state of California, you can either have one monitor that hasn't run or two monitors that haven't run, depending on the year of the vehicle, and whether it's gas or diesel, whatever. So that was a big deal. Now, the reason they came up with monitors in the first place was because what people were doing is when they had a problem with their car, you know, something that turned on the check engine light, they would just erase all the codes that would put out the check engine light. Then they'd take their car to get smog tested, hoping that the light wouldn't come back on before the smog test was over. That's why they came up with monitors, because now the new rule is you have to run a bunch of these monitors, all of these for sure, and most of these, or you can't even do a smog test. It'll fail you just based on monitors not run. That's why most places, at least legit places, will put it on a small scan tool first so that you don't waste your money, because then you get a record with the state as having failed a test, which is not good. Okay. Yeah. So here's the thing about that though. How do we get these monitors to run? Because the problem is, turns out back in the olden days, remember, these manufacturers were crazy. We did not have a standardized way of getting these monitors to run. As a result, like when I bought that 99 Suburban, I'm driving it home from Victorville and I got about 30 miles away from where I bought it, and all of a sudden the check engine light comes on. Fortunately, I had it hooked up to that scan tool at the time, and it told me that I had a catalytic converter code. Great. Now what am I supposed to do? Drive all the way back there? I had another dude driving my Corvette. So I just decided, yeah, what the hell, I got it cheap. So anyways, my point was, I brought the Suburban home. I know I've got a catalytic converter code. Well, guess what? When I went into monitors, I found out that it hadn't run the oxygen sensor heater either. The oxygen sensor monitor either. In fact, there was like 2 or 3 monitors it hadn't run. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Now, I noticed just the same problem Gabe had. I noticed that my temperature gauge was very, very low on this, probably like 150 degrees Fahrenheit. That's after driving it for a half hour. That ain't right. So I suspected that someone had taken the thermostat out. Well, it turns out they didn't take out the thermostat, but what they did was they changed the value of it. Old school grandpa's trick. What they used to do is, this vehicle came with a 195-degree thermostat. And what they do is they change the thermostat to 160 degree, because they figure that increases the distance between what the engine usually runs at and boiling over. That's an old school thing. That's what farmers would do with the tractors. Whatever the case, what I found out from doing my research on the internet was, guess what? These monitors won't run unless the engine is at least 190 degrees Fahrenheit, which means these monitors hadn't run in years. So I went down, I got the 100, I think this was the last time I worked on a car myself. I went down and got 195-degree thermostat, the proper thermostat, and I installed it. And sure enough, these monitors ran. And when I went down to get the new catalytic converter, bam, 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 I had 4 monitors run, and all of a sudden I was ready to pass smog legally, which is groovy because they're clamping down on this stuff. It's just going to get harder. I would not suggest buying a car that won't pass smog legally. I would not suggest it. No, it's not. Most cars ain't worth it. I mean, why would I spend as much fixing a car as the car is worth? That doesn't make sense. So we need to understand what it takes to run these monitors. And that, my friends, is called, come on now. That's really situated wrong. There we go. That's called enable criteria. You know what I like? You know what I like? I like it when my good friend, Mr. Rivera, is just like seeing all this stuff going, oh, yeah, okay, okay. Yeah, let me write that down. Yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah. Yeah. That's always good to help the pros in the field. All right, so enable criteria asks the question, what needs to occur to get this monitor to run? In case you're wondering.
Rocliffe, I was wrong when I told you it's about 3 things to do that cheap way to keep them from stealing your car. It's actually 7 items you need.
Okay, well, send a text to Jordan or send the text to me and I'll send it to Jordan.
I'll text him.
Okay. What we're trying to do, Chuck, is my friend's got a 68 California Special Mustang and he doesn't want to drive it because they're so easy to steal. So, you know, Rudy is the king of car security. So trying to figure out a way to keep it from ending up in somebody else's driveway.
And the alarm system run on its own battery?
That's interesting. Locking hood pins?
Well, I mean, you know, a lot of times.
You can set your alarm on a standalone battery and just have it charge off the alternator as well.
Yeah.
It's like having a capacitor built into your alarm system. So that way, if they cut the power to the car, like let's say if they like disabled the fuse up front, the alarm would still be active due to the fact that it's running on its own standalone battery. The problem is that ups the price of the alarm dramatically.
It is a California 200 or California car.
Yeah, I was about to say it's a lot cheaper than losing your car.
That's right. Ain't no price high enough.
Yeah, those cars are so easy to break into. Evidently, we used to live in a world where crime was not so rampant, right? Because they never would have made a car that easy to break into if we had lived in the same world we live in now. That's a poignant piece of social commentary right there. Damn. What did we get in return for that world that we gave up? That's deep. Yeah, maybe you guys better sit down. Yeah.
Not a damn thing.
Not a damn thing good. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we got locked up for a year. So question mark. So this say, well, I mean, the engine coolant temperature sensor has to read 190 degrees Fahrenheit, whatever, etc. ECT, etc. Now, what other enable criteria are there? Well, I'm glad you asked because I just happen to have a list. This right here is the official list of enable criteria for General Motors. Now, you'll notice just the universal one is whack. Okay, so the fuel tank has to be between 1/4 and 3/4 full. So if you're running it full all the time, or if you're running it empty all the time, your monitors ain't gonna run. Start cold, below 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, well, what if you're in Ontario in the middle of summer? It never gets below 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Therefore, monitors will never run. This is whack. This is technicians rebelled against this, and so did car owners, because eventually, I mean, like if you're in Arizona, if you're in Phoenix in the middle of summer, it never gets below that. As a result, you have to drive your car up into the mountains and stay overnight, or you're never going to be able to run the monitors. If you can't run the monitors, you can't get your car smogged, and you can't confirm that the repair was done. Okay, so accelerate to 40 to 55 miles an hour at 25% throttle and maintain speed for 5 minutes. Do you see how whack these things are? But this is real. Yeah. So here's the thing. This is specific to the General Motors, to the Suburban, and it was not till I did these things that I got the monitors to run. Look, okay, cold start. In order to be classified as a cold start, the engine coolant temperature must be below 122 degrees Fahrenheit, which means if you've run this car today, you might as well hang it up till tomorrow. And within 11 degrees Fahrenheit of the ambient air temperature sensor. Okay, that makes good sense. If it's not within 11 degrees, well then, oh shoot, yeah. So if it's 60 degrees outside, no dice. Do not leave the key in prior to the cold start, or the heated oxygen sensor diagnostic may not run. Now, if I didn't have this list, how the hell would I know all these things? Idle. The engine must be run for 2.5 minutes with the air conditioner on and the rear defroster on. How the hell are you supposed to know that? The more electrical load you can apply, the better. This will test the oxygen sensor heater, the passive air, the purge, no flow, misfire, and if closed loop is achieved, fuel trim. Okay, as soon as I did that, as soon as I turned on the air conditioner, even though my air conditioner doesn't work yet, Chuck's going to fix that next year with my new air conditioner.
Right, that's
There you
right.
go, Chuck.
That's right.
Now, don't I also have to order a bunch of refrigerant?
Yeah.
I wonder how much of that you can store. Oh, I wonder how much of that's real explosive, isn't it? I don't know. It's been so
Probably.
long. Yeah. Well, there's one way to find out, right? So yeah, so I had to run the air conditioner, even though my air conditioner doesn't work. But when I did that, sure enough, it ran the monitors. Okay, turn off the air conditioner and all other loads and apply half throttle until 55 miles an hour is reached. During this time, the misfire, fuel trim, and purge flow diagnostics will be performed. Hold a steady speed of 55 miles an hour for 3 minutes. If you ever wanted to hear what the horns of different cars sounded like, that's a good way to do it. And as you can see, you know, there's a whole bunch of ridiculous, very touchy standards here. So,
Why do they make all those?
because they didn't care. Because
Wow.
this is what the GM technicians have to learn. Okay, let's step back a piece and say, okay, why did Honda and Toyota not even give us alignment specifications? Why did Honda not allow us to connect a scan tool to get any data until 1995? Why? Because the majority of the money that these manufacturers make is on service, not on sale of the car.
That's
Especially now with the internet and stuff, it's very hard to make money on sale of the car because everybody knows who's got the cheapest price.
Yeah.
So they have to make it up on service. So as a result, what they do is they try to make it so you have to take your car to the dealer. Now, back before this stuff was published, which took a couple of years, back before this stuff was published, you'd have to drive around and drive around and drive around and hope that you satisfied all these. I don't know. When I see that you're supposed to do this with as much electrical load as possible, I'm very suspicious. When I look at a bunch of this stuff, it makes me very suspicious that they were trying to make it so you couldn't just drive around and run the monitors, right? So,
Seems
okay,
like
here's what happened during this era, Michelle. What would happen is someone would fix your car and they wouldn't want to drive around for 2 hours hoping the monitors run, because it could take hundreds of miles for the monitors to run. So what they would do is they say, okay, customer, here's your car back. If the light comes back on, bring your car back. drive 300 miles, and if your light comes on, bring it back. That's really what was happening with professional technicians. And that was completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. Customers don't need to put up with that. So what we started doing is, people started developing. Skyline College, Rick Escalambre, what a freaking guy that was. He was one of the major guys in the California auto teachers who took it upon himself to figure out a universal drive cycle that could get the monitors to run on every car. But you have to have like, okay, turn right on this street, turn left on this street, and then, go 30 miles an hour, half throttle. And, it was
Complicated.
nightmarish, right? So now what we can do now is we can simulate a bunch of these with a scan tool, turning purge valves on and off and such like, which is much better. Now, let me push back and point to an issue that we've talked about earlier in this class. Scott Brown, Connie and Dick's, fine shop. They're going to charge you an hour for diagnostic, guaranteed. Okay, why? Because they're going to scan the car before it comes in. For two reasons. Number one, to make sure that they know what the problem is. Plus, maybe while your car's there, maybe would you like this other problem you have fixed too? Plus, they want to find out, is this one of those people that when their transmission starts to slip, they bring their car in for an oil change, and then after you change their oil, they say, well, now the transmission doesn't work. It worked fine when I came here. So it's a self-protection thing as well. Okay, now after they do the repair, they're going to go ahead and make sure to run all the monitors so that they don't have any people coming back saying, hey, I got my car fixed at Connie and Dick's, and 2 days later the light came back on. That's how you ruin your reputation. And people in Claremont, they ain't gonna be down with that. They ain't gonna be down with losing their car 2 days in the same week. So as a result, it's going to be more expensive because they're definitely doing more diagnostic work, but the result turns out better now, so much better. What you're going to find in most of these shops around Montclair is they're going to say, okay, we fixed it. Go drive around for 300 miles and see if the light comes back on. Now, as we've been discussing for like the last 10 minutes, you could drive this 300 miles and it would still not run the EVAP monitor. That's very possible. My black Mustang only ran the EVAP monitor once. Guess how I know? Because when it did, it failed. That was a joke. Not really though. So you could run for miles and miles and miles and still not run the monitor. Like for instance, I'll bet you this guy, when he changed that thermostat from 195 to 160, he didn't realize that there was 3 monitors that never ran after that. Because, if they never run, they're not going to throw up a check engine light. So this is crazy stuff. This is where we were, and this is why this field keeps getting better and better, but it does have its quirks, and these were the years of the quirks, right? 22 years ago, 1999, for instance. Okay, so the verbiage you saw said drive cycle. And what a drive cycle is where can we drive and how can we drive so that all these monitors, well, at least most of these monitors run, or I should say at least enough monitors run to where I can go do a smog inspection on this vehicle. That became a fine art in the era of where do I go, which street do I turn left, which street do I turn right, back up, accelerate, decelerate, coast. Every shop had it mapped out where they could satisfy all these criteria. Okay, so drive cycle is defined as driving fast, slow, idle, whatever, to get the enable criteria satisfied, to get the enable criteria satisfied so that the monitors will run. You know what is very nice on YouTube now is I noticed that the best video on cam and crank sensor synchronization is actually in Spanish. In fact, there's a bunch of them in Spanish on that very topic, and there's no good ones in English.
Really?
Yeah, which I thought was funny. Okay. So you got that?
Yep.
All right. Actually, I think this is kind of review from the beginning, so I want to make sure that we get through this and get on to our next topic. Let me go if I'm going too fast, but when the PCM, powertrain control module, engine control unit, whatever they call it, PCM, powertrain control module, old school, senses a fault. How does it sense a fault? Running the monitors.
Monitors, yeah.
It will, oh, sorry, colon. 1, wait for a reoccurrence. Recurrencia? I don't know. Okay, so back in the olden days, what happened was we didn't have, sophisticated strategies and tactics. So what would happen is you'd be driving down the parking lot and you'd pull in and you'd hit the little bumper thing too hard, and all of a sudden your check engine light would come on. Them days sucked. Because basically what happened was the connectors came loose, or maybe a wire was loose or something got knocked. The computer sensed that you had a problem and it threw on the check engine light. All right, so now you have a choice. You can either take your car into a mechanic and have them tell you, no, there's really nothing wrong, and the car would run fine. Or you could drive around with a check engine light on, which unnerved most people, and it infuriated the people at California Air Resources Board, because what happened was the early electronics were so unreliable in this regard that people got used to driving around with the check engine light on. Hence, we get back to OBD2. Hence, we get back to much higher levels of monitoring of engine systems, because people would drive around for 50,000 miles with a check engine light on. You can imagine what that would do to your emissions. So that's why they came after it. That's one of the big reasons we had OBD2. Because after all, most of the manufacturers would either not give you service information or they would not give you access to the data stream. As a result, it was insanely inefficient to try to fix these cars unless you worked in a dealer. As a result, people would drive around with their check engine lights on for tens of thousands of miles.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah. Okay, so wait for recurrence to verify that the fault is really happening. Ever happening. This Cheryl Crow. Every day is a winding road. That's what it is. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to store that little blip. It's going to store that, and it's going to call that a pending code. Pending means waiting. And pending code means that the computer says, okay, I saw this problem once, let's see if it happens again. Because just because I saw something once doesn't give me confidence that I really have a problem. If I see this twice, I don't know, it depends on the monitor, depends on the year. Because like on old Fords, you could take the spark plug wire off and you could get 5,000 misfires and it still wouldn't throw code. Them's was the days. That's changed though. So anyway, it's just going to wait for a certain number of reoccurrences, let's put it that way to be safe, to verify that the fault is really happening. All right, that's called, sets a pending code. Number 2. If the problem happens again, or should I say, if the monitors discover it happening again. The PCM sets a stored code. It illuminates, which means turns on. The MIL. May 20th is the last day of school, not for this class, but the Thursday before that. Spring break is March 22nd through the 26th. So you know. April, May, 12 weeks. Doesn't seem like it. If the problem happens again, the PCM sets a stored code. So now it says, yeah, I have confirmed that this is actually a real problem. And it turns on the check engine light. Malfunction indicator lamp is the official OBD2 terminology. Gonna say check engine light, gonna say service engine soon, gonna say just give you a picture of an engine. Not maintenance required, that's a different light. Maintenance required says
Oh,
change your oil, right? Check your TPMS. And stores a freeze frame. Jay Giles. So I guess you could say number 1 sets a stored code, number 2 illuminates the MIL, and number 3 stores a freeze frame, which is a picture of engine data. Hey Dave, did you get your truck fixed?
yeah, thanks to Mr. Chuck.
Hey,
What? Chuck actually worked on a car and it worked afterwards?
Yes, he did.
What was it, Chuck?
no, Dave did a great job putting the front caliper on. The noise was coming from the back rear, the passenger side rear tire was, the rotors were down to the pads, the metal. The
There you go.
shoe was down to the metal.
That'll do it. 3/4 ton?
Yes.
It was a
Yeah, so
big
that's
boy.
a big old drum, right?
It has the hat for the parking brake, has shoes, and it has a rotor in the rear.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. Good, man. Did you leave a review on Chuck's Yelp page?
I didn't know he had one. I will.
We'll make one. Good, man. So, me and Rudy were actually scanning his car on Monday, and we found out that not only is there a CAN high and a CAN low, but there's a medium speed CAN bus too, which I thought was interesting. Now, I don't know if we talked about this in this class, but there's a high-speed controller. There's a high-speed network and a low-speed network. The high-speed network is for information that has to be transmitted quickly, like oxygen sensor signals or pulse width or misfires or something like that. The low speed is for stuff that you can take your time at, like radio, window position, stuff that doesn't matter that much. But this actually had, the 2012 Flex had a medium speed as well, which I thought was interesting. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you discover, and you're only going to discover it by taking the scan tool out there and running through the menus, because it's going to be different for different manufacturers, different years, different models, different engines, which is why it's very hard to have an encyclopedic knowledge of this stuff. I mean, it's hard to make generalizations because sure enough, it's relatively easy to find exceptions. Like there were Mercedes with muffler bearings. There were. Okay, so that is my theory on that. Malfunction indicator lamp. Usually people call that the check engine light. Now, am I still on monitors? Yes, I am. Here's the thing about monitors, folks. You need to make sure that you always take one of these if you're thinking about buying a used car, because this thing has saved my bacon many a time. You know why? Because here's what people do. You can erase all the monitors. Well, you can erase the check engine light, because one of the first things you find on this OBD menu is how to erase codes. So people know that if they're trying to sell a car that has got a check engine light on, that they're going to either not make the sale or they're going to have to sell it for a lot less. So what they would do was, as soon as you said, well, I'll be over at 4, about 350, they'll go out there and erase all the codes. Now, it may take a while for that check engine light to come back on. In fact, the engine might have to warm up first or something like that. So what they would do is they would erase all the codes, which basically resets all the monitors to hour 0. And they would hope that the check engine light wouldn't come on while you were driving it. This has happened to me a couple of times. People do this stuff all the time. Well, that's why the monitors became part of the software, a deliberate part of the software, is so we could find people that did that. Now, the reason I like the 3 lights so much is because without even opening the hood, you can plug this in and you can find out a whole lot about what's going on with this engine. Because if it reads yellow, that means it hasn't run the monitors. That means somebody probably just erased the codes because they know they got a problem. Usually how they hide this is they say, oh yeah, I got you a new battery. That's why it hasn't run the monitors. Yeah, Suburban. Then over here, the red thing says, yeah, I ran the monitors and I found a problem. Or this one over here, the green one, says, I ran the monitors and I didn't find a problem. So if you're testing out a used car and it's green, for the most part, that means A, the monitors have run, the thing hasn't been erased, the monitors have run and it didn't find a problem, and B, and this is the most important part, 2000 and later, this car will pass smog, because after 2000 in the state of California, they don't even bother testing the tailpipe anymore. They just hook it up to OBD2. And if it's run all the monitors and it's passed, done. Not, well, I shouldn't say run all the monitors. If it's run enough monitors and they've all passed, if it's passed every monitor that it's run, and it's only missing 1 or 2 depending on the year, that's it. That's a pass. So look, buying a used car that won't pass smog can be a freaking nightmare. So if you can avoid that, I think it's well worth it. That's why I would strongly suggest not getting anything older than 2000. So that's a monitors thing. Okay, let us review, just because it's important to review. You got that? Did I actually show you the bottom of that page? Okay. Oh shoot, didn't spell that right. Now, what's the freeze frame? Let me finish that. What's a freeze frame? A freeze frame is going to give you a minimum data set. It's not going to give you 8 pages of data about what happened when this DTC set. But what it's going to do is it's going to show you a minimum, maybe a page of data. And the whole point of that is to show you what was going on with the engine when the fault occurred. Were you going up a hill? Were you going 80 miles an hour? Were you in a parking lot? Was the engine warmed up, cooled, whatever? So what they're going to do, throttle open, closed, whatever. So it's going to give you some tips in terms of repairing this. Now, here's the thing. Like I said, the first menu you're going to see on this little scan tool is going to show you how to erase the codes. Most people, they don't know about cars. They're going to get really nervous and they're going to say, oh, erase codes. That's what I want because I don't want this check engine light on. Problem is, when you erase codes, you erase the freeze frame as well. which means the monitors have to all start over again, which means it might take a while of driving or whatever just to get the freaking light to come back on. That's time we don't have if we're trying to make money doing this, or even if we're trying to save money doing this. And it's going to erase the freeze frame, and now you're starting from guessing. So erase codes, you should only be doing it after you have fixed the problem, hopefully. Back in the day, we used to erase the codes just to see if they'd come back, but now that we have pending codes, the computer has already done that for us effectively. Didn't turn on the light until it saw a reoccurrence. That gives us confidence that you actually do have that problem. Questions, comments, thoughts on that?
Nope.
Okay. A lot of useful diagnostic information gets erased this way. You know, people just get excited. They get nervous. It's like, oh, well, it's like when you're in the emergency room, right? When you feel real sick enough to go to the emergency room, you're like, damn, I can't wait to get to the emergency room. Well, after you're there for about an hour, you're like, I will saw this arm off if I can get out of this place. Yeah. Should have listened to my own advice. Last time I was in the emergency room, they did an arterial blood gas test.
Ow.
That freaking hurt. Oh my
Oh.
God. And they did it on 2 different arms because the dude couldn't get it to work on one arm.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was awesome. So
Yeah, that's awful.
I was like, okay, I'll leave your emergency room. I'm getting the hint, right? All right. 2 types
You have a question? Okay.
of MILs. That's malfunction indicator lamps. You know, the kids got blown out of their prom this year, and I'm hoping to God they got blown out of their homecoming this year, and I'm hoping to God they don't get blown out of their prom.
Yeah, that would suck.
This is terrible. And if you look at the arrangements they've made for these elementary school kids, it's child abuse what they're proposing.
Yeah,
Just absolute for little 6-year-olds. Put them in a 3-sided cubicle that's, you know,
yeah, that's
6
rough.
inches from their face on each side. People are crazy.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a 2010 Toyota Camry. They have
Okay.
calls, but I tried to clear it.
I can't hear you.
I have a 2010 Toyota Camry,
Yeah.
but I have 3 calls. But I tried to clear, but it went to the permanent call. It's not clear. I did say,
Oh, okay.
what is still there?
We're going to talk about permanent codes next. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, good. All right. 2 types of malfunction indicator lamps. There's the solid. Good, man. There's the solid and there's the flashing.
Mhm.
Good. Man, this is great. All right. Solid means the computer has found a problem. So it has stored a DTC. It has illuminated the malfunction indicator lamp, and it has stored a freeze frame. That's if the light is solid. Now you'll notice that that light is orange, which means it's not a crisis. But here's where it becomes a crisis, is when the light is flashing. Because the flashing light, the flashing malfunction indicator lamp says risk of imminent, which means immediate, engine or catalytic converter damage. That means do not drive. Like a misfire. If you had a spark plug go out or a spark plug wire go out, you would end up getting a flashing check engine light. Why? Because you're going to be dumping all kinds of raw fuel into the catalytic converter. That could hydraulic a cylinder, which could destroy your engine if you stop the engine. Or it could just be passing so much raw fuel down into the catalytic converter that it destroyed the catalytic converter. Ah, do not drive. So you're not supposed to drive it. If it starts flashing, I'm serious. Don't drive it 5 miles, 10 miles, whatever.
Anyone
It
else?
could end up costing you way more than it's worth. That's why you got to get that auto club. Get them toes.
Yeah, it's very helpful.
Unbelievably. Yeah, I don't know why people would do without it.
I know it.
Yeah, it's nice that I'm driving like 12,000 miles less per year and they gave me a $60 check to make up for it.
Cool.
Yeah, well, $60, right?
Yeah, totally.
Rudy, that was funny as hell. Okay. Next page. So does that mean you can drive on a solid check engine light? Yeah, people do it all the time. You shouldn't, but you can. Oh, that's us. All right. Many monitors will self-reset and turn off the malfunction indicator lamp if the problem is not found again. Or there are enough key cycles. Hey, Chuck, what are you using for an impact to get those wheels off?
I use a large breaker bar to break the lug nuts first.
Sure.
Then I lift it up. Then I have a electric impact gun, Ingersoll Rand, similar to the ones at school, but not as nearly enough torque like the ones we have at school. And I take the
Ingersoll
lug
Rand
nuts out.
battery operated?
Hmm?
Is it battery operated?
Yeah, it's battery operated.
Huh, how do you like it? Not enough torque?
Not enough torque, not compared to the, what is that, the red ones? the
Milwaukee's, yeah.
Milwaukee's, man, those things are a lot better.
The new Matco's got 1,400 foot-pounds. 1,400, that's twice as much as the Milwaukee's. But
Well, I do have to say that the Ingersoll Rand, a true impact gun, you know, when you let off that trigger, it stops the bit from turning. You know what I mean?
really?
So you don't
Yeah.
spin the lug nuts off. It doesn't continually spin like an air gun.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that way the lug nut don't spin right off the socket when you're, you know, as soon as you let off
Right.
the trigger.
Yeah. Go moving down the street.
Right.
Well, Ingersoll Rand makes pretty good stuff, and it tends to be reasonably priced because it's not a brand name that's in favor these days. But geez, they've been around for 100 years.
I've had it for about 10 years and the batteries still hold up a good charge.
Wow. Well, that would explain why it'd be weak, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me finish this sentence. Using this word a lot, reoccurring. I don't even know if that's a word. I know recurring is, but it doesn't sound right. Okay, so many monitors will self-reset if, okay, so let me tell you, I'm working in LA and I've got my 94 Ford Explorer. I come back from Watts. I go up Kellogg Hill, light comes on. I later put it on a scan tool and I found out it was P0171, P0174, lean exhaust. Because I'm going up the hill going 75 miles an hour because it's 10 o'clock at night and I want to go to bed. So high engine speed, high engine load, and it turns on the check engine light for lean exhaust. Why? Turns out it was a fuel filter. Always the fuel filter. If you have a lean exhaust at high engine speed, high engine load, always check the fuel filter first because that's the primary symptom of a bad fuel filter. people always change the exhaust because it says lean exhaust sensor or something like that. And people say, oh, I got to change the sensor. No, that's not it. So anyway, what would happen is the light would turn on as I'm going up the hill, but when I started coasting down the hill, the light would go out. Why? Because it keeps running the monitors, and when it doesn't find the problem, it extinguishes the light. Now, key cycles. Back in the olden days, back before OBD1, if you got the check engine light with a Chrysler, what would happen is you'd have to cycle the keys, the ignition on 5 times to get the light to go out. It was kind of stuff like that. A key cycle is defined as you put the key in the ignition, you turn the ignition on, you turn the ignition off, take the key out. That's considered a key cycle. Some you can just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But most of these are like 40 key cycles before it'll turn the light out by itself. But it will. Now, here's the thing. This is my Joel Rivera Memorial Lecture, because we got to talk about this relatively new thing. It's not new, it's 2009. Permanent codes.
Yes, permanent code.
Códigos permanentes.
Permanentes.
Wow. And he taught in both languages. He's equally incoherent in both languages. I wrote códigos. Anyways, so here's what permanent codes are. They came to the realization that what was happening is people were erasing the codes and then going get the smog test. And then they were hoping that it wouldn't run that monitor. So they'd run every other monitor and then they'd erase that one code. And then since they had run every monitor except 1 or 2, you could still smog test it. So they got furious about that and they came up with this new thing called permanent codes. 12 years now. But permanent codes are codes that cannot be erased until the condition that caused them has been fixed. That's one part. So you can't just erase the code. It's going to stay there. That's one part. Part 2 is the only way you can get the code to erase is to run the monitor and have the monitor verify that the problem was fixed. That's what's different about the permanent codes. It requires you to actually fix the problem. So permanent codes cannot be erased until the condition that caused them has been fixed. And the fix, hey Rudy, are you figuring out how to say this in Spanish? Is verified by running the monitors.
No puedes quitar el código antes de que reglas el problema y el sensor diga el computadora de que ya lo arreglaste el problema.
Wow.
Wow. See or no?
Thank you very much.
Me.
Yep.
What year was that, Mr. Roquette?
2009.
Permanent codes?
2009. Yeah.
2009?
Yep. So, you know, actually it's just keeping the mechanics honest. That's fine. But it means you have to run the monitor. So now you have to have a better understanding of enable criteria and stuff like that. But this is all service information that you should have available, right? I mean, if you're trying to do this without service information, and if you're trying to do this without an advanced scan tool with bidirectional controls, I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't. Now, here's what you can do with a scan tool. You can simulate the monitor running, you know, by turning on purge control valves and vent valves and stuff like that. you can do what the monitor will do when it runs and verify that all these things work. And then when the monitor runs, you can be certain that it will actually pass. But you don't want to let this car out of your shop without that permanent code being erased, which means you've got enable criteria to deal with. So it's just something new. Nothing really amazing, but it is different. Okay. Well, it's 7:30. You want to take a 15? Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Okay, I'll pause my little
Me?
recordo. Pause recording. I'll see you in 50. Let's do it. All right, so we are making progress through our from codes. Okay. There we go. Erasing codes. Now we already talked about this, but let me just blow through this. That's erasing codes. Resets all monitors. That's one of the big reasons why you don't want to use code reset, because it resets all the monitors. So if you were hoping to smog this car today, if you erase the codes, now all the monitors will have to run again. And like you see on the freaking Suburban, that could be a significant issue. Hey, Rudy, should I get rid of the 99 Suburban and get a newer model? Would there be an advantage in that? I mean, I would have to go from like the 454 to like a 5.3. Chuck, you got a thought on that? It seems to me like it would be a step backwards unless I could get a diesel maybe.
No, you're not going to find any diesels, but the newer the model, the better interior you get.
I don't know. I got the leather seats, right?
I don't
You
know.
could
I
be
kind
better.
of.
But like I said, if you want to get rid of it, pass it over here.
If Chuck gets
I
Power
want
Pro,
me
you get the
another-
Suburban.
I
Where were
want
you
me
saying,
another
Chuck?
Suburban.
What were you saying, Chuck?
Keep it.
What say what?
I think you should keep it
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking so too.
because $60,000 to replace it with something new versus what you already
Oh,
have.
no. I'm talking about getting a 2003 or something. Did they still make the 454 back then?
I don't know.
Yeah, because I don't want to get a much smaller engine.
Well, thing is that if you scratched it or dinged it, it's not a big deal.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so
You know.
erasing the codes resets all the monitors. That's a big problem. Now it's going to turn off the check engine light. It's going to erase the DTC and it's going to erase the freeze frame. So you're going to lose a ton of diagnostic information. Plus it's going to reset all the monitors. So this light right here, it's true. It's going to go from red to yellow, which is going in the right direction anyway. But I mean, like I said, it could take 300 miles to run these monitors. And if you didn't know, if you had a 160-degree thermostat, it would never run monitors. So it's usually a bad bet unless you think you've really fixed the problem. Okay. So it's going to take the stored DTC away, erase the stored DTC. It's going to erase the freeze frame. It's going to turn off the check engine light. People say, well, problem solved. No, that's just the symptoms. That's like putting ice cubes in your mouth and then taking your temperature. Oh, it's down to 98.6. No, it's not. You've just masked the symptoms. You still have the problem. So we already talked about pending codes and stored codes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So we don't have to do that. Regenerative braking, I believe we'll talk about later. Now we get to start the fuel system, unless anybody's got some objections to it. Good. Okay. Well, sorry about that, but I just got crossed up in my notes. That's what I get for using notes. Come on. What do I do with it? There it goes. Okay, fuel systems. Back to fuel systems. So, like I said, we're going to quit talking about theory and we're going to be talking about cars now all the time. But now it's going to be much more efficient to talk about cars because now we have the understanding of the fundamental basic electrical components. All right, so I believe we were at fuel level sender. That's a variable resistor. It's going to send a signal to the PCM telling it you can run certain monitors, and also you can send to the instrument cluster how much fuel you have. Fuel pump. Fuel pump pressurizes the fuel so that we can take it from where we have it to where we want it. And also, so when the fuel injector is open, fuel comes spraying out. Fuel filter. Fuel filter is going to clean out the fine particles so that they don't clog the injectors. Now there is a sock filter on the bottom of the fuel pump, this little thing right here, but it's really not much of a filter. It's just there to protect the pump from like the biggest chunks, dirt and stuff that gets in there, rust. We used to have a problem with steel tanks back in the day. Graveyard Cars, the only show I like on cars. And I love it too, and it's hardly ever on, even if it is Chrysler's. So, all right, fuel lines. That's what connects all the parts of the fuel system together, just like the wires connect the parts of an electrical circuit together. Fuel pressure regulator. That's what regulates the pressure, obviously. And why we need to regulate the pressure is because we need to not make the pump work harder than it has to for durability and reliability sake. And also because the amount of fuel that gets sprayed, let's say you had a 3 millisecond injector on, the amount of fuel that gets sprayed is going to be proportional to how much fuel pressure you have. So we have to change the fuel pressure so that A, the pump will last on one end, and B, we'll have enough fuel on the other end. Rudy, I was thinking about putting a supercharger on the freaking Z06, but if I did that, I'd probably have to change the injectors and I'd definitely have to reprogram it, right?
Yep.
Yeah, nah.
But you can reprogram it without blocking out any of the emission controls.
Yeah, but would it pass smog legally?
Yes, it would still pass smog
Uh-oh.
because you're not bypassing any of the emission codes.
Don't tell me no more. Okay, so the fuel pressure regulator is there to give us longer pump life and also to make it so we're going to have enough fuel delivery on high engine speed, high engine load conditions. All right, the fuel rail. The fuel rail is what all the injectors mount to. So I will show you this beautiful thing right here.
You think the ZR1 is?
ZR1's a 6.2 liter.
But it's still a supercharged V8 that passes legit emissions.
Well, yeah, but that's factory supercharger though. Plus it's a 6.2.
Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
But your car did come with a option for a factory supercharger.
No, it didn't. Not in that year.
Yes, it did. It was a back order option. Yes. Knew they were option. You could opt for that option.
Okay, so anyway, my point was this is a fuel rail for a V6 General Motors. And as you can see, it's got the fuel injectors right there. It's made of steel, just like mis brazos. And it's got the fuel pressure regulator right there, which is vacuum operated. It's got the place where you put the gauge, which makes GM very nice. So you don't have to open up the system to find out what the fuel pressure is. And here you have the inlet, and that's for the return. You can see that the inlet is much bigger than the return because all this fuel, a lot of it is going to get sprayed out the injectors. You can probably see in more detail that the inlet is bigger than the return because some of the fuel is going to get used. So that right there is called the fuel rail, and that's what you mount the injectors to. And then the fuel injectors are right there, and that's what they look like. And here's the place where you activate it with 12 volts. And you can check it for resistance to make sure that they all have the same resistance, which is necessary if you want them to all spray the same when they get 12 volts. Seal up here, seal down there. If this seal leaks, you're going to get a vacuum leak. If this seal leaks, you're going to get a fuel leak. So what I do with these is if I suspect this is causing a problem, like I got a vacuum leak on one cylinder, what I'll do is I'll come in here and I'll spray brake cleaner, usually brake cleaner because it's cleaner. I'll spray brake cleaner around this hole and see if the engine RPM changes, which would signify that this O-ring's bad. 2 O-rings on that. This one causes a fuel, the top one will cause a fuel leak if it goes bad. This one will cause a vacuum leak if it goes bad. Little player's tip for you, free of charge. So the fuel injectors is the actual part that sprays fuel into the intake manifold on the intake stroke so that we can get fuel into the engine. Okay, so we need to remember this little thing right here. It's called the fire triangle. And that means that in order to have a fire, we have to have 3 things. Where's my little chat thing? Where is it? 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 More chat, 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 chat. There we go. There we go. Oh, nobody's talking to me anyway. Quack. So fire triangle.
Cool.
One thing we need if we want to have a fire, because after all, internal combustion engine means that there's a fire inside.
Air,
We need to have is fuel.
air.
Also need to have air. Actually, we don't need air, but what we need is the oxygen in air, which is 21% of air. And then the last thing we need is heat or spark. Now, if you have these 3 things, you're going to have a fire. If you don't have any one of these things, you won't have a fire. So let's look at this in terms of basic engine operation. Now, we haven't talked about this since August. So, you know, in August, I had no idea how to run an auto program on Zoom. I mean, everything last year was just emergency. Yeah, just do it, right? Just get started. Okay, so the fuel system is responsible for delivering fuel to the engine. Air is delivered to the engine through the downstroke of the piston on the intake stroke, right? We create a low pressure inside the cylinder. Since pressure is higher outside the engine than it is inside the engine, we get flow. Intake valves open, so we get flow. And heat or spark, well, this is what determines whether the engine is a diesel motor or whether it's gasoline, propane, CNG or alcohol, compressed natural gas, or alcohol.
Or ethanol.
Which is alcohol, yeah, okay. So these are spark ignition engines. That means it has a spark plug. And what delivers that spark is the ignition system, which is why I say if you have a no start condition, 93% of the time it's either going to be a spark problem or a fuel problem. There you go. So, well, I should say fuel system over here.
Hey, real quick, if you want more power out of that Z06, why don't you just convert to E85?
Ew.
You'll pick up way more power just on the E85 conversion.
Now,
And the best part is there's a gas station just down the road from you that sells it.
how are you going to get more power off something that has lower heat value per gallon?
I don't know, but they're making more horsepower just on the E85 conversion straight than you do by adding
Have to change the injector.
extra power adders that burn more fuel.
Guys, what do you think is going to happen with that alcohol as it goes through my fuel system?
It's gonna
Very
dissolve it.
corrosive. Very corrosive. Yeah, pretty much dissolve it. Dissolve all my aluminum heads. Okay, so this is just a reminder so we can remember that the fuel system is tasked with delivering one leg of the fire triangle. Now, it has to deliver it in the correct proportions too, which is why we have the PCM control it now so that we can get precise fuel control, which is the key to everything good in our engines these days. All right. Now let's talk about the rails. Ah. Ah. And then we went through 15 pages of computer control. Damn, we've been busy tonight. That's good. Get your money's worth. Man, if you guys were paying me by the page, you'd probably be, what, spending a dime a page? All right, so fuel systems, 3 of them. Now, I'm not going to talk about CNG, stuff like that. You can probably find a YouTube video on that. I'm just talking about gasoline systems right here. Return. The return system is the classical electronic fuel injection system. I'm not going to talk about carbureted systems. I mean, you can probably watch a YouTube video on that. I just don't think we have time, and I doubt the relevance. Anybody who has a car with a carburetor on it probably already knows this stuff, because all the rest of the carbureted cars went to hell long ago where they belong. So here's a return system. So we're going to basically use half the page on that. So let me go like that. Let me put over here a tank with fuel in it. So that's the tank. And there's the fuel in it. I'm going to change colors on my pens. Like I said, you should get yourself colored pens, pencils. Lopez, you still with me?
Ouch.
That's the pump. Lopez, you still here? Lopez, you're hurting my feelings.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh,
Sorry.
thank God. All right. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the pump in the tank. And what the pump's going to do is it's going to create pressure, and it's going to pump the fuel towards the engine. First thing we meet as we leave the tank is what?
The filter.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's going to make sure that we're not going to clog up those injectors with a bunch of dirty fuel. Okay, so I'm going to come along with my beautiful fuel line. Oh, I'm about to run out of ink, maybe. I'm going to come up here like this. A little bit, come that way. And then I got a big old piece like this. I'm going to call that the fuel rail.
4-cylinder.
Yep. 4-cylinder looks like this. You getting that? Sorry. You like this. Got the little injectors going like that. Master and Commander. That's a good movie to show a young person, especially a dude. Okay, so these are the injectors. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the injectores.
Injectores.
Yep. And those are going to go in the port, intake port. So as air flows past them when we're on the intake stroke, piston's coming down on the intake stroke, intake valve is open, air is flowing through the intake port, and we're going to spray a bunch of fuel in, and the two will enter the cylinder together. That's how a gasoline motor works of this variety. Okay, at the end of the fuel rail, you're going to have this little number here with a little vacuum spigot coming out the end. That is the fuel pressure. What is it, Rudy?
Regulator.
That's the regulator, and that's what's going to control the fuel pressure. How is it going to control the fuel pressure? Well, this is a return system. So let me show you what happens. Well, go ahead. In fact, I can go ahead and just do this, might make it easier for you. This line comes back here and dumps back into the tank. This is the return line. You know, I don't know anybody else that teaches like I do in terms of doing the drawings, but I think the drawings are really, really essential and really, really helpful.
I think so.
You know, they're simple drawings,
Yeah, it makes it easier for you to comprehend.
right? I don't see how you would do it without it.
I don't either.
All the videos I see, it's like they're either too complicated or they got production value issues where you can't make head or tails of it. So let's go this way, this way. There you go. Now, the pump's going to pressurize the fuel. It's going to travel through the fuel filter, just like the oil system, right? The first thing the oil sees is the filter. Then it goes over here to the fuel rail, where it gets distributed to each injector, which is fired by the PCM. The fuel pressure regulator makes sure that we got the same amount of pressure on each injector, so it fires the same amount of fuel with the same pulse width. And how the fuel pressure regulator does that is by regulating the amount of fuel that goes in the return, which goes back to the tank and gets sprayed back in the tank. Unfortunately, it's going to be pretty warm because it went through the pump. Increased pressure, increased temperature, right? Boyle's ideal gas law. Okay, so let me show you what it looks like in real life. Are you still on this drawing?
Done.
Okay. This right here is the fuel rail. This is the incoming, and then it goes to all the injectors, and then it comes back here, and then it goes to the fuel pressure regulator with the vacuum tap coming out. That's where the pressure gauge goes, and then the return line comes out this way. So that's how it works. That's the fuel rail right there. And that's what it looks like on General Motors V6. You know, just about the time that I get perfected, set up for teaching at home, they're going to say, okay, back to school on Monday.
Right?
Yeah. Does this system have problems? Yeah, the system has problems. As you can see, it's got a whole lot of fuel lines, you know, out and back. Plus, what happens is it's constantly circulating fuel throughout the system, which is going to increase the temperature of the fuel and make it much more likely to evaporate. Yeah, it's going to make it much more likely to evaporate. And the problem with that is now we've got to bring in the evaporative emission system just to freaking keep this in check. And the problem is on a hot day, you're heating up the fuel even more, which is you're increasing the evaporation, which means you got to make the charcoal canister bigger. You start running into issues with controlling vapor. Did we talk about the history of emission controls in this class?
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's usually how I teach emission controls. We should probably do that sometime soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next week.
Figure out, right? Figure out what we want to learn. Hopefully we'll get there, but you know, the time's kind of short and I don't want to rush it. Okay, so let's just talk for a moment about these fuel pressures. Sorry, I ran you out of space. Three types of fuel systems. If you want to draw it some other way, you're more than welcome to. There's carburetor back in the day. And carburetors, you would expect 5 to 7 PSI, pounds per square inch. Hey, Chuck, did you want one of my 17,000 snap-on torque wrenches that isn't in foot-pounds?
No, I got plenty of Craftsmans. I'm good.
I'll stack them deep and sell them cheap. Yeah, but I don't need 6 snap-on torque wrenches, so maybe I'll include that in your compensation package.
Okay.
All right, so the first type of fuel injection was throttle body injection. That just means instead of having individual injectors for each cylinder, now you've just got 1 or 2 on the centralized throttle body spraying for all the cylinders. Wasn't the greatest, but what it did was it got us away from many of the pathologies of a carburetor. Port fuel injection is what everybody's been using. Of course, now we got some new contender, but we would expect on throttle body fuel injection, we would expect probably 15 to 35 PSI because you've got a big central injector instead of a bunch of individual ones. So you don't have to worry so much about pulse width because the fuel's got a lot more time to mix. Port fuel injection though, we're going to expect probably 35 to 75 PSI. Now, where would you find out what the specification was? Service
And,
information.
yeah.
So that's a return system. Extremely common. Pretty simple to figure out, think about. You got that? The next system is more sophisticated. Very similar though. Now I can start down here. So here's the tank. That goes like that. Got the same outgoing. Here's a little sock on the end of the pump. It's going to push fuel line over here. This system is called returnless.
Kitty, get off of there.
Who, me?
Oh, my cat.
No,
I'm sleeping in a bed tent, so the mice can't get to me. She just almost tore it down. Come on, dang it, Kitty.
I'm gonna bring some dogs.
I know, I need help, man. I'm desperate.
Here's the thing. If the dogs come over, are they going to be knocking over a whole bunch of, you got China all over the place?
No.
Because it might get pretty violent. But they'll do the job, that's for sure.
Okay, well, I could pick everything up.
All this broken glass.
Yeah, no, nothing like that.
Okay, good. All right, so there's the filter. And we're coming over again to the fuel rail. All of this is the same. But now, instead of having a fuel pressure regulator, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, instead of having a fuel pressure regulator, let me give me my directional arrows. What we have here is a fuel pressure sensor. And what it's going to do is it's going to sense the fuel pressure instead of regulating it. So it's a sensor instead of an actuator. Then what? Well, I'll tell you what. Over here is the powertrain.
Fuel pump.
Powertrain control module. And the sensor is going to report to the powertrain control module. That's what sensors do. It's going to report the fuel pressure to the powertrain control module, which knows how much fuel pressure it wants. So watch. Powertrain control module is going to actually control the fuel pump. How?
Activating it and deactivating it.
How?
Right.
With pulse width.
Sensors?
Yep, pulse width modulation. Yep. Remember, it's a motor. It doesn't want to see 6 volts. It wants to see 12 volts all the time. But what we're doing with pulse width modulation, it's the same way we run the fuel injectors, right? What we do with pulse width modulation, actually, it's the same way we run the oxygen sensor heaters too. What we do with pulse width modulation is we only run it for, say, 50% of the time if we want a lower pressure. If we run it 100% of the time, it's going to give us maximum pressure. And if we run it 20% of the time, it's going to give us a lower pressure. The pressure is going to be proportional to how much of the time the pump is energized. Pulse width modulation. I'm assuming it'd probably be good for a slight review right now. Pulse width modulation is the way we control stuff now. Like, for instance, if my good friend Mr. Alvarado was here, we would be discussing motor controls, DC motor controls, AC motor controls. which is primarily industrial motor controls, which is primarily pulse width modulated. They're doing frequency drive too, but pulse width modulation simply refers to how much of the available time is being used as a percentage. So let's look, you got this?
Mhm.
Let's make sure we understand. Pulse width modulation, PWM, I'm just going to say. PWM,
Paper down.
thank you, allows us to keep the voltage at 12 volts, whatever, nominal, but still control output. Like, for instance, on a fuel injector, if we have it on for a little bit of time, it's going to spray a certain amount of fuel. If we have it on for a longer amount of time, it's going to spray more fuel. That's pulse width modulation. You could do a light bulb the same way. If it was on 100% of the time, the bulb would be at maximum brightness. If it was only on for 50% of the time, it'd be a 50% brightness. These things are happening so quickly that you're not going to notice it going on and off. What you're going to notice is a change in brightness or a change in volume or a change in fuel pressure, because we can see that if the pump's not running, it's not going to be creating pressure. So what does it look like? Well, here we have 12 volts going to 0. Over here is time, of course. So out of, let's say this is 10 milliseconds. Small m, big S, from here to here. If my pump is only energized for 10% of the time, that's going to give us a significantly less pressure than Tim. Zero. I'm going to say, okay,
Hey,
from
Jeff.
here to here. There you go. Thank you. Let's come in here like this. Actually, it would be in the middle, so I've kind of screwed that up. But let's say this is 80% of the time. See, what's happening is we're going to be energizing the pump for a longer period of time. As a result, it's going to put out more pressure. That make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. And we're doing this on a lot of motors. In fact, this is probably how we're going to be controlling the idle speed. Little solenoid. More time it's on, the more time it's open.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we control a bunch of stuff with pulse width modulation. I mean, back in the day, we didn't used to have to teach it because it's kind of, it's one of the more esoteric things you have to understand. But now it's like pulse width modulation is all over the place. So we use it to, so we really have to teach it. Now, pulse width modulation is how we control the lights in your car. You know how the lights get, well, at least in my car, the lights stay on for 30 seconds. And when they go out, they don't just pop out, they gradually dim. That's pulse width modulated. All this stuff is pulse width modulation. We're seeing it all over the car. Why? Because we understood that we had to get better at it. So the good thing is that it allows us to stay with 12 volts. Now, solenoids and motors, they don't want to see half voltage. It burns them up because whatever they lose in volts, they make up for in current. That's no good. So this allows us to keep feeding solenoids and motors 12 volts, but still control their activity. Like a solenoid valve, we can control how much flow there is. Now look, in a regular solenoid valve, if you don't pulse width modulate it, you've got two choices, either 0% or 100%, either all the way on or all the way off. But if we use pulse width modulation, we can make it 72% open or 31% open. And we can continuously change this based on, for instance, oxygen sensor outputs. So now we can use this to control EGR flow, for instance. Remember back in the old days, this was all vacuum operated. Back in the old days, remember when the pressure regulator was vacuum operated? Well, sometimes it gave us the wrong approach. Incidentally, what we used to do, little diagnostic tip on these old school ones, what we used to do is we would take the vacuum hose off of the pressure regulator, which would put it to full pressure, and that would tell us the maximum pressure the pump was capable of producing. Because it would give you full pressure at maximum, at wide open throttle, which is when vacuum is the lowest, right? Now, idle speed, throttle blades are closed, vacuum is at the highest, which means this would automatically make the fuel pressure the lowest. That's for pump life, right? Why pump life? Well, because if you keep running around with high blood pressure, eventually you're going to beat up your heart so bad that you'll have A, permanent damage, and B, end up dying from it. So that's my theory on that. 821, which tells me we may actually have time for the third fuel system. You got this?
Yep.
Okay. This has been around for about 12 years, but you know, we don't usually see cars that young. Number 3, direct injection. Now, there's cars that just have port fuel injection, there's cars that have just direct injection, and there's cars that have both. There's reason for putting both. But direct injection, the idea is that we're going to put the injector straight into the cylinder. As a result, we're going to miss out on a whole bunch of pathologies that the port fuel injector has. For instance, the port fuel injector is going to spray into the intake manifold. Well, the walls of the intake manifold, for instance, may be very cold. If that's the case, the fuel is going to spray into the walls of the intake manifold and it's going to stick to the walls. That's bad. So it's going to take a whole bunch of extra fuel to get this thing running when it's cold. Also, when the fuel gets into the cylinder, it is not evenly distributed. As a result, we have to put in extra fuel to make up for the fact that we know we're not going to get even distribution. That's why direct injection can save you up to like 15% in fuel economy. And since it's superior combustion, it's also going to give us better emissions and more power. So most of your modern engines are going to come with direct injection now, or direct injection plus port fuel injection. Okay, so how does it work? Basically, it works exactly the same as a diesel motor injector works. We're going to be injecting straight into the cylinder. As a result, we can't do this 35 PSI thing anymore. Why? Because if we have 150 PSI off of the compression stroke, and we had an injector that was just 35 PSI, as soon as it opened, it would blow air into the injector backwards instead of blowing fuel out of the injector. As a result, direct injection requires a high pressure fuel pump. This is why the direct injection system is really expensive, because just like a diesel motor requires a high pressure fuel pump, those things are crazy expensive. The pressure on a direct injector is like 3,000 PSI.
Wow.
Well, why? Because remember the olden days when we used to have 2 balloons connected by a piece of pipe? Let's review. I've got 15 PSI over here. I've got 2 balloons connected by a piece of pipe. I've got 0 PSI over here. If I connect those 2 with a piece of pipe, will there be flow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because pressure creates flow, right?
Mhm.
It will flow in this direction until both pressures are equalized.
7.5.
Yep. So I've got another 2 balloons with a piece of pipe in between them. I've got 0 PSI here, and I've got 150 PSI here. Now, will there be flow?
Yes.
Yes.
Direction, right?
Right.
Will the flow rates be the same?
Yes.
Yes.
Will the flow rates be the same?
We went that one and that one? The first two, both of
This
them?
one and this one?
Yeah.
No. Why?
Well, because
Because
it's
It's a lot
10 times
higher.
as much pressure. Yeah, it's got 10 times as much pressure, right? So it's going to have a much higher flow rate.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Good. Okay. And it's like, well, I don't know. I don't have a good example, but it's true. Okay, so my point was here I've got 1,000 psi over here, and I got 1,000 psi here. Will there be flow?
No.
Even,
No.
But it's got 1,000 psi.
they're gonna balance out.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because the difference in pressures is what causes flow, right?
Mhm.
We might just have time to get this done. The difference in pressures causes flow. That's why when you do the arterial gas test, it freaking hurts because the artery's under pressure.
It hurts
Usually
bad.
they just take blood on the vein. It's easy. It's under suction.
Mhm.
No, it's not under suction. It's just a lower pressure. Causes flow. There we go. What about this one over here? I've got 0 psi over here, and I've got minus 10 psi over here. Is it possible to have a negative pressure?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
What's it called?
Vacuum.
Vacuum or suction. Sure. So all we're saying is positive pressure is blowing. The airflow is going this way. Sucking, airflow is going this way. So all negative means is that it's going the opposite direction. Doesn't mean anything special. It's just going the opposite direction. For instance, when we pull the piston down on the intake stroke, we're creating a negative pressure inside the cylinder. Since the intake valve is open
Suction.
and the pressure is higher outside the engine than it is inside the cylinder, we're going to get flow until the pressure is equalized. Actually, it'll keep going a little bit after that because of inertia, but basically that's what it is. All right, so I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on this. Can I go on?
Yep.
All right. Direct injection works like a diesel motor, which also has a direct injection. Now, the fuel system works like a diesel motor. So I'll say diesel motor fuel system because it still has spark plugs. With the injector shooting directly into the cylinder. Now there's some funky things they can do with stratified charge and stuff like that. Toyota's doing it. It's pretty exciting and unusual, where they're getting crazy lean mixtures like 22-to-1, which is freaking cool. So they're getting crazy fuel economy, crazy freaking emissions levels, like ultra low emissions. Yes. Since the injector is injecting into pressure, that's compression pressure, I should say. It must be much higher. And we're talking about 3,000 PSI. You know what they say, don't look for a fuel leak by putting your finger around it, because 3,000 PSI will cut your finger off. It's like an airless paint sprayer.
Ouch.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't use your finger.
I can't play piano.
What do you do? Now, is 3,000 PSI more likely to leak than 30 PSI? Absolutely, all day long. Is 3,000 volts more likely to leak than 30 volts? All
Yep.
day long. That's why it's a good analogy. Okay. Now, you got that?
Yep.
So it's just like a diesel motor. It requires a really high pressure pump because remember, on a diesel motor, the compression is twice as high. So you're probably getting 300 PSI compression pressure, which is why if you want fuel to flow into the cylinder, when you open up that injector, the injector freaking got to have super high pressures. And that means you got to have a really high pressure pump and a really expensive high pressure pump, because in order to get high pressures out of a pump, it's going to be expensive.
And so would this be more likely to break down too? To break
Oh, shoot.
those pumps?
Now you would think so, but they tend to be built more heavy duty because it's definitely operating under more stress, but we've been running diesel motors at these pressures for decades.
True.
Now, you would think it would be more likely to break, but they're still going to make it super heavy duty. But what's that mean to you? If it goes bad, this is a much more expensive system.
Yeah.
Yeah, much more expensive fuel system, because now instead of one pump, you got to have two pumps, and the second pump is crazy expensive. Plus, you have to have high pressure injectors, which are also more expensive.
Yeah.
David Burks got kicked off at a bad time, but anyway, glad you're back, dude. Direct injection. Just like diesels. Does Mopar make a Suburban type vehicle? I could get a diesel on a Ford, huh?
Yeah.
No. Ford no longer has a diesel.
I'm not talking about getting a new car. I'm talking about getting like a 2005.
You'd have to find an Excursion diesel.
Could I get a V10?
Yeah, you could get the V10. That's gas, though.
Yeah, the V10 gas.
And you could easier find the V10 than you would with a Power Stroke.
Power stroke and 6.9.
But you need to look for the Excursion if you're looking for Ford. And Dodge does not have
It's so big. Why do I get
anything like that.
Why would I get an Excursion instead of an Expedition?
Because the Expedition's not a Suburban. It's a Tahoe.
One of those.
Huh, okay. Glad
You
somebody-
want a Suburban size, it's the Excursion.
The gas mileage is terrible.
Of course it is.
Yeah,
It's a
it costs me like
van.
$100 a week just to go local, not even going anywhere.
Yeah, but you didn't have to worry about getting run into.
That's true.
Okay, so I just heard someone say, and I hadn't thought about it. You know what this is? This is the 4th pen I've run dry this year. And what? See that big sore on my finger?
Mm-hmm.
That's from rubbing it on paper all day.
Oh,
Ay, Dios mío. Yeah, so. Workman's comp. You saw it here. Quick. Okay, so here we go. Requires a high, come on now. Come on. Oh, I dried that one out too. Let's see, use this one. I'm gonna put it among my souvenirs.
I think we need to chip in and buy Rokiff new pins.
Among my souvenirs. There's so many sad World War II songs. No, I got pens, thank you. Yeah, maybe I can do that with the freaking $2,500 a week I've been waiting, $2,500 a month I've been wasting. Requires a high pressure pump. 3,000 PSI. God, I'm somewhat angry about that, but you know why? Because all my lame teachers said only losers think about money. Oh, okay. Wish I was more of a loser. Wish I was more of a loser too. The pump in the tank. Yeah, the only people that don't think about money are people that have always had it
Or never had it,
in. Well, they be thinking about money all the time.
maybe.
Hopefully. Lift pump. Yeah, they call it a lift pump. That's old diesel terminology. So I'm gonna come in here like this. Perfect. Perfect-ish, I should say. So very similar. Got the tank right here. Got the pump like that. Little sock on it. Comes over here like this. Hey, Rudy, am I going to have a high pressure filter on that? Probably not. I'm going to just blow it up.
Can you move the pad up, please?
I think so.
There we go.
Now, most people never change the fuel filter. So as soon as you buy a used car, the first thing I would do is I would get another filter. Because like I said, if it's clogged, it's just going to beat the hell out of the pump. Number one cause of pump failures is a clogged fuel filter. It's not worth it. Now,
Is there a
when
way
you-
to test it? To see if
Well,
it's dirty?
no,
So you
no.
just change it and figure it's time.
Well, I mean, you can look at it and see if it's the original. I mean, if it's the original, it's got 140,000 miles on it. Yeah, it should have been changed a long time ago.
Right.
Damage is done though. Now, if the fuel filter goes bad, what's the symptom going to be? You're going to get a lean exhaust when you're high engine speed, high engine load. But that's the only time. Fuel filter will never cause a problem at an idle. It's like trying to like trying to breathe through a drinking straw, right? If I'm just sitting here chilling, that's plenty of airflow. But if I go running around the track, it's going to be too much restriction. That's the same way a clogged fuel filter is. It'll allow enough fuel flow for a good idle, but when you try to go high engine speed, high engine load, that's when it'll break down.
Yeah.
Cause too much restriction, too much pressure drop, which is of course caused by resistance, just like voltage drop is caused by resistance. And so this is going to come up here like this to the high pressure pump. And then it's going to come over here to the direct injectors. Go like this. It's going to have a medium pressure sensor on top of the tank. It's going to have a high pressure sensor on top of the rail. Yeah, I just want to get this completed though, like that. There's the rail. So it's a very similar setup. It's just got an extra pump in it, an extra insanely expensive pump.
And your diesels would have a water filtration system on that diesel to
Like-
filter out the water.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking like a bong.
No. It's a water filter for the fuel to clean it.
Water separator.
Yeah, water separator
There you go.
to make sure that the diesel is as clean as possible when it sprays in the motor.
That was just a test. I was just trying to see what the see if you knew what that.
But you
word
would
meant.
have a filter on that high pressure system as well.
I don't know about that. We'll have to see. Let's look and see. Oh, I found a really good video, incidentally.
What is
You're
it?
like, finally, I've been waiting freaking 3 years for that. Okay, so let's go over here, You got that drawing? Okay, check this out. Not that one. This one. No, not that one. Oh, got it. Oh, well, see, there's Nate Davis with fuel injector waveform analysis. That was a great one. That's 2 weeks old. You know who invented the stepper motor? It's worst. R. Kelly. That was a joke. Anyway, the point I was. All right, that's not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is. Come on, don't do this to me. Don't even think of doing this to me. Don't even think. Don't even. Come on now. Well, there you can find out about direct injection versus port injection. That's actually a pretty good video. But they do try to make it funny. Here's the big problem. Let's try this. See that right there?
Yeah,
Right. Of course, if I wait, we're not going to see it. Carbon buildup on the intake valves. That's a problem with direct injection engines. That's one of the reasons why they are putting right there. See that?
Yeah, it's
That's
gross.
carbon buildup on the intake valve. That doesn't happen with port fuel injection because it's continuously cleaning the crap off the valve. No, I'm looking for Nissan. Nissan Juke. That's what it was. This is just a great video. This the one? Yeah, that right there. Here's my band. Beautiful animation, right? There's got the crankshaft. There's the main journals. And here come the bearings, top and bottom. That right there is the trigger ring the trigger wheel that I was talking about last week. There for the crankshaft position sensor, right?
Yeah.
All right, connecting rod, la bujía, no, biela. Yeah, okay. Yeah, but here's the spark plug. There's the pistons, got the rings on it. This is actually Chuck playing the saxophone. Now you'll notice you'll notice it's a 4-cylinder engine. You'll notice 2 of the pistons are up at the same time, 2 of the pistons are down at the same time, but they're 2 strokes away. So this one is between intake and exhaust. This one's between compression and power, right? This one's between, oh God, why am I doing this to myself? Anyway, they're not on the same stroke. That's how you keep the engine balanced. That right there is the sprocket for the timing chain. Look at that. That's freaking cool animation. Over here's the bucket lifters. We have the valve springs. Got the valve guides right there. We got the valves coming in. Those are the valve seats. 2 camshafts. That's the wheel for the camshaft position sensor right back there. And these camshafts, one's an intake camshaft, one's the exhaust camshaft, and that's what's going to open the valves and control when they close. The valve springs themselves are what's going to actually close the valves, though. All right, see that? That is variable valve timing. That's the mechanism that's going to allow us to advance and retard the cams while the engine's operating. So it gives us the emissions, idle quality, and fuel economy of a weak engine, but also when we want it, super good power. So it acts like 2 engines because remember, the camshaft is what determines the personality of the engine. Play it, Chuck, play it. That Chuck sure can swing, can he? Right? Is that a cool animation or what? All right, it's got a timing chain, not a timing belt. That's one of the things why people always like the Nissans. Well, now pretty much everything's got a timing chain, but this had a timing chain first. And this is how variable valve timing works. It's Rudy playing the piano. that's weird looking to me. I don't understand.
It's weird
that.
looking.
Yeah, isn't it?
Hmm.
Rudy, you know why it's shaped like that? DLC.
It's got to do with how long the valves are held open.
Yeah, but I don't see. Maybe it's to get the bucket lifters to rotate.
Yeah,
My
it's
suspicion.
to get them to start pushing down sooner, to take up any slack.
I have to study that.
See, because if you look right there on this one cylinder, you see that it starts pushing the cylinder to get the spring to start moving way before that tip ever gets there to get
Oh,
the full lift.
because it takes a lot more power to get it moving than it does to keep it moving.
Yep.
So it would reduce the friction. Yeah, that makes good sense. Just like it's harder to push a chair and get it moving than it is to keep it moving after it's already moving. It's the difference between static and dynamic friction. You know what, Rudy? I thought you were making this all up, but I doff my hat to you if I was wearing one. Tickle them keys, tickle them ivories, Rudy. My doctor says I can't have sodium valves, bad for my heart. That is kind of a weird. Oh, where's the oil control ring? That doesn't. Well, maybe it's just a bad animation, but it's weird to see the uneven spacing of these rings. They must have been paying some PhDs in mechanical engineering to figure this out.
Sure.
All right, this has port and direct injection, which means intake stroke, the port injector fires, filling the cylinder with a lean mixture of fuel. So watch. As the piston's coming up, it's probably stratified charge like I was telling you. There's a very small spray of a rich mixture, rich enough to get it lit, because it's much easier to light a mixture with, a blowtorch than it is with a match. So what they're doing is they're coming in with a very lean mixture with the port fuel injector, and then they're injecting a very rich mixture that comes in, hits the top of the piston, and heads straight for the spark plug. As a result, this is just like the old CVCC Hondas from like the early 80s, stratified charge. Stratified means it's different in different places. As a result, they can burn crazy lean mixtures in vehicles like this because they're not depending on a lean mixture to just get fired with a spark plug. That's what they're doing with the direct injector. As a result, they can run crazy, like Super Cruise, like 20-1, and it'll run down the street like that. Super lean mixture, so it gets great emissions, it gets great fuel economy. All right, that right there is the tensioner. These black things are the guides, and what the tensioner is going to do is it's going to push the guides against the chain to keep it tight. Spark plugs, coil unplug, valve covers. Beautiful flex plate. Then comes on the transaxle.
You're watching?
Yeah.
That's the starter motor right there. Power steering pump? No, I think that's a water pump in it. I wasn't looking close enough. All right, I know this part. Yeah, that's the water pump. Okay. This right here is the air conditioning compressor. Sorry, that's the front cover. That right there is the alternator, charges the battery.
Power steering.
All right, that's going to be 2 camshaft position sensors. No, the camshaft position sensors are on the back. I wonder what that is. I don't know. Oh, that, you know what that is? That's the activation solenoids for the variable valve timing. Front pulley. That right there is the tensioner for the belt. That's the port fuel injectors going in. Intake manifold made of plastic. That is the drive-by-wire throttle body. Now that looks like where the water pump would be, but that's probably the thermostat outlet, probably. Exhaust manifold going to a turbo.
Turbo.
All right, that right there is an intercooler to cool down the intake charge so we can run more advanced and higher compression. There you go. Now there's that. So let's go back. What does it say? Direct injection engines, how to protect yourself from valve corrosion. Okay, there's another video that I would like you to watch at your leisure. It is called GDI pressure control solenoid. Yeah, that's how they control pressures. Now, the one I was talking about is, well, it's made by Bosch. I know that much. So, if you can find that, it's around here somewhere. Direct injection animation. There is a problem with direct injection. If you have just direct injection, what happens is, see this right here? Remember, the intake valve is under a vacuum, which means the valve is going up and down in the guide like this, and it's got a seal on top. It'll suck oil down that guide. And what'll happen is the oil will get stuck on the back of the intake valve, which creates a problem, most typically hard starting. Now, why doesn't this happen with port fuel injection? Because there's so much gasoline passing this valve that it cleans off all the extra oil. Well, with regular port fuel without port fuel injection, this just builds up carbon because the valve is hot. So it just like turns into a rock. This is why with just direct injection alone, you have to be using engine cleaner a lot to make sure that this doesn't happen. Remember, typical symptom of this is going to be hard starting. So let us go back because we got a little bit to do right here and there.
I wonder if that's what's going on with the flex.
Gosh, we can hear you.
Maybe I have a lot of carbon built up on the valves.
Yeah. Well, check out, see if it's got direct or see if it's got direct and port. Now,
How would you clean that up?
there's special, they make special cleaners. Probably go in a vacuum hose or something. I don't know. Probably different for different vehicles.
Okay, I gotta look that up.
Oh, yeah, look that up. That would be a good suspicion because it'll mess up with your airflow very badly. So if it had port fuel injectors, it would just have basically two sets of injectors. As you can imagine, that gets pricey. But what they're doing with direct injection is getting insane numbers in terms of fuel economy and emissions. So, you know, when we're talking about like the 40% efficiency engine, that's direct injected for sure. Now, as you know, efficiency is almost always directly proportional to how much this stuff's going to cost. So, you know, what the manufacturers are constantly trying to do is they're trying to constantly make more power with a smaller engine. Now, is that going to beat the hell out of the engine? Yeah, it is. It is. But it's going to make it so you can have a car that has good power that still gets really good gas mileage and meets ever more stringent fuel economy standards. So I am pretty convinced that that's all the fuel systems I'm going to talk about. If you want to understand like CNG or something like that, you can do that, YouTube, whatever, but I don't think there's enough chance that you're ever going to see one to make it worth pursuing.
Good night, y'all.
Right.
Night, boo. What? It's 8:55. Good.
Yeah, I
now
know.
we
I got some stuff to get done before the night's out.
Good. Now we can start talking about you as soon as you log off.
All right. Good night.
We won't.
Night.
Thanks.
Congratulations on your house.
Yeah, that's big medicine. Big medicine.
Wait for them. He's not.
So,
Oh, he isn't.
what else do you want to know? It is currently 8:55.
Or it was did I show
What
you
else
the
do you need to
picture that I
know?
took
You
of,
fixed
like,
everything yet?
forehead selfie of the Griffith Observatory?
Where's Gabe? What?
When you guys were running and I took like a dance selfie.
Yeah. Don't.
I think I was like
Sounds like
Private
That's
conversation.
comedy.
and I put that as
Right?
my profile picture.
who is that?
That's fucking comedy.
Mr.
Yeah,
Roadcliffe,
dude, all these people are
Alright.
fucking hilarious.
you'd be sorry if you bought a Ford diesel, that's for sure.
Really?
Yeah, injectors always mess up.
Well, my friend loves his. Shoot.
You're better off with a Cummins if you're gonna go with a diesel.
Yeah. Well, as far as that goes, I don't think I'm gonna get another vehicle anyway, because now I got to make up for all the money I
I've got
was.
problems.
You know, if I got to get that radiator fixed though, but if I got a vehicle that runs, then you know, I could just buy carpet or something like that. You know, this house has been kind of beat up in the last 20 years, so. You know, what can you do? No matter how much money you got, it still seems like it's never enough. So what we got to do is we got to figure out how to make more money per hour so we can work less and earn more. Because after all, money is all about supporting our life, not being our life. Yeah.
Mhm.
We're gonna work less and make more so we can spend more time doing the stuff that's really important. So
Yep.
that's what we're trying to do here, trying to get Joel a raise, trying to get more ASE certifications so he can take over Roquef's job. Won't be long. I'm planning on retiring in like 7-8 years, so someone's going to need to do it. Michelle will do it for us. Cupcakes and auto. Yep, that's all any student ever asked for. So hopefully next week I will have news for you about reopening of the schools, blah, blah, blah. But as I say, they seem to be giving us a lot of broad hints on every news program I see. So
How many people are in our class?
like
I need to know for cupcakes. Hello.
9. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, it just means more cupcakes for everybody.
Yeah.
Everyone gets 4 instead. Like 10, something like that. For some reason we didn't get any new students.
Huh.
You know, it's a sin. I checked in with one of my students that joined the ROP welding class. There's only 11 students in that. Usually it's got like 50.
That sucks.
Like people use any excuse not to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I told them, you do the workbook now while we're on distance learning. Next semester, you're going to be in the shop the whole freaking time while everyone else is sitting around doing the book learning. So it's dumb. You know, I got a student that's doing distance learning aeronautics over at Mount Sac. As a junior in high school, she gets to take all these classes. She'll be flying a plane next year.
Rad.
And what's rad about that is most of the people she goes to school with won't have a driver's license by the time they're 24, and she'll be driving in the sky.
Yep. Sounds a lot better.
Well, the thing is, Michelle, you got to understand, dealing with students like this is usually a whole bunch of heartbreak. You know, it's like 180 heartbreaks a day. So when you got one that's actually going to make it out of the hole they're in, it's like makes all the rest worth it, right?
Yeah, it would. Yeah.
You know, it's like you got 180 patients in triage and 179 of them are going to die. Okay, then you better focus on the one that's going to live.
For sure.
That's a grisly way of putting it, but it's accurate.
Yeah.
You know, it's a failure factory, man.
Yeah, that's sad.
A lot of bad outcomes. So it's wonderful to see a student that's got
Yeah,
a chance,
for sure.
giving themselves a chance, I guess is the accurate way of doing
Yeah.
it. So everybody's cars run good?
Mm-hmm.
You're okay?
So far.
Yeah. You know, isn't it nice to have your car running right again?
Yeah, yeah.
Always.
Yeah. So
She did a new episode of WandaVision.
I got to get the Suburban fixed because not having it fixed is being annoying now. So anyway, Chuck, we'll talk because we've got power probes to speak of and beautiful snap-on torque wrenches. Living the
All you gotta
dream.
do is text me.
All right. All right.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, folks.
All
Appreciate it.
right.
See you next
Okay,
week.
see you next week.
Can't wait.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank
All
you.
right. See you, Chuck.
Folks.
All right.
All
Good night.
right.
Dave.
Salute you. Thanks.